Great. Good morning,
Yep.
Mark.
Hi, Bill.
Great to be here.
Yep.
So we're going to talk this morning about leadership, and I really appreciate your inspiration on this. And, you're very focused and clear consideration in our earlier communications about leadership. And I just think it's really it is a very important topic nowadays for people because everyone is thinking about, and not everyone, but a lot of people are thinking about and wondering what authentic life is. And, on one hand, times are so stressful and difficult, and so people are looking for the biggest tree to. Many people, in response to that stress, are trying to respond and respond in a way that one would say that would be leadership or, in their own life. And so I think it, in our current kind of crazy, outrageous cultural context, relevant discussion. And I'm really glad to be having this discussion with you.
So I'm looking forward to it.
Great. And I wonder, could you just begin a little bit with just a few words or not, or more words than a few, of your thoughts and feelings about leadership and how it works and can work in people's lives?
Great. Yeah, well, a couple of things. I think, nowadays there's just so much written about leadership. It's just a hot topic. And if, you Googled it, for instance, you'd probably find like 1 million hits. When you go to Amazon and look for a book on leadership, I did it the other day, and just in this month alone, there's 55,000 titles.
Wow.
So everybody's writing about leadership. But mostly people read books on leadership and they understand it, but really don't have an access to what leadership is. And, there's a saying in Zen Buddhism, understanding's the booby prize. So knowing about something and actually having access to it and practicing it, it's two different worlds.
Yes, indeed.
It's similar like the diet industry it's billions and billions of dollars, and people know, how to lose weight. It's really simple. You just eat less, yet the knowing of it really makes very little difference in people's lives who want to lose weight. And it's similar to leadership. There's sort of like an access to leadership that goes beyond any understanding about it.
Yes. It seems to be so true about anything. It's not until one comes alive as that understanding that the serious conversations can begin. And it's really an important point that you're making, I think. Understanding in a subjective, interior way versus embodying and moving forward and living our understanding, and whether it's dieting or leadership. And it's, a very key point. Really good one. Thanks.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. It's the sort of that inner sense of knowing, rather than understanding something sort of from the outside in, and then being able to embody it and live it. That's really what makes the difference.
Because I think so many people feel just victimized by the complexity of our times, and they feel overwhelmed, certainly in the arena of weight loss, you hear people talk about just being overwhelmed by, the stress in their lives and the impulse to eat. But just relationship where one is sort of a victim to circumstances and not feeling that they don't have access to any part of themselves that can move forward. And, so I think that kind of is helping to sort of push the issue, well, what would it mean to actually move forward and respond and embody and do what my mind thinks I can do? And I think that's the point you're making.
Right. No, that's really good. I mean, what you're saying actually goes, what I think, to the heart of the matter. And it's in what you mentioned about being a victim. So most people don't even realize that that's, in fact, their fundamental relationship with life is circumstantial. Where people primarily look out at life, at the circumstances that they have to deal with. And some of those circumstances, in effect, could be their own feelings and thoughts. But it's sort of living life from the outside in, where we've been conditioned to believe if we can just change our circumstances, or have more or better or different circumstances, then that's the access to being free or to becoming a leader in your own life. And it's a very reasonable way to live. But in essence, it doesn't make anything available, because what happens in that type of relationship with life is you are embodying sort of this role of being a victim, because then you live a life that's very, very much circumstantial. Rather than living a life, as you said, from the inside out, where your fundamental relationship with life is you're at the source or cause of whatever it is in life that you want to create.
Indeed, and what you're saying is when our attention is on the circumstances outside of us, exteriors, then it strikes me that we're just ignoring, in essence, that relationship to life, as you say, is ignoring our inner resources, and that sort of sets us back or sets us apart from being able to really make a difference in our own life and in the lives of others when we ignore our deepest and even not so deep resources, all because we're just focused on the exterior. And, well, I need this and that and that. And if I only had this situation and these kinds of people, then I could make something happen. But the focus here is on our interior experience. And that's kind of what I hear you saying. And the fact that a lot of us are not even aware of that is what our orientation to life is probably an interesting question.
Right.
In our society, it's very materialistic and exterior oriented to money, jobs, exterior signs of success, quote unquote, relationships. And, so a lot of us aren't even aware that we ignore our inner resources. So even to bring that up is a sort of a revolutionary point.
Yes, that's right. And there's also a place where, it can be deceptive because we live in such a materialistic culture or consumer-driven culture, which there's nothing wrong with that. For most of us, we're the most educated, privileged, wealthiest people on the planet. The life we have has been great, and it's allowed us to really create an extraordinary world. So it's not like consumerism or materialism is wrong in and of itself. It's just that when you get entrenched in it, there's this illusion that something other than oneself can be the source of happiness or fulfillment or any like that. And it's also like it's not so much. Sometimes it's very difficult, at least for me, to even make the distinction between inner and outer. Because for me, it's just I'm living my life.
Yes, yes. No,
but
it's
the
a
essence
good point.
of it. So I was going to say the essence of it is living life authentically.
Yes. Yes. No, I appreciate that because, and once again, it's what is our relationship to materialism and success in that way. And if our relationship is that we ignore our resources or our own authenticity, then, we won't be authentic. But yes, I think it's a good point that, certainly success in ways that we know in our culture is not the problem, to be sure, but rather our relationship to options in our life and our relationship to life itself. And I really appreciate the point that the point you're making is to be authentic in one as one, and then all manners of success and achievement will come as they may, with oneself and with others. That's a good point.
Right. I say when I'm working with leaders that perhaps the foundations for leadership or for being a leader and exercising leadership effectively, the foundation for it lies in responsibility, integrity, and authenticity. So when those are in place and you're living from a context or a purpose much greater than oneself, then there's a foundation that you have from which to be a leader. So you could say that integrity and authenticity and something bigger than oneself, that's not leadership. But if that's in place, it creates a foundation that gives one access to leadership or to being a leader.
Oh, I see. And I wonder just if we could explore a little bit, because you've used the words several times now, integrity and authenticity. And if we could just sort of look at those, and they sound like they're very similar or the same. But just if we could explore what those mean for any one of us, that would be helpful.
Okay, well, what I mean, for instance, with integrity, it's not what most people think of as integrity. Because, if I asked you what's integrity, what's there for you? What's there for you to say? Bill, what's integrity for you?
Well, I would say things like, doing what you say and saying what you do, being honest in my dealings with others, and not taking things that aren't mine and just living in a kind of a basic idea of what a positive and person lives in the world. But I think you mean something much deeper than that.
Well, but actually, in what you said, you began to touch on some of it. See, for most of us, integrity is like it's a normative value. And
a code.
What was that?
A code of living.
Yeah, a code of living. That's a great way to say it. It without thinking, most of us feel that integrity is like this code of living. That's what I mean by normative. There's a right way to live. And when you touched on honesty, you that could touch on that. You know, if you're living a life of integrity, there's certain ways that you should be living, and there's other ways that are not. So it's equated with ethics or morality. And of course, there's nothing wrong with that. If you look at Webster's most other dictionaries, they actually have like 4 definitions for integrity. And integrity as a code of conduct, or as a moral code, that is, in fact, one of the definitions. But the first 3 have to do with integrity as a state or condition of wholeness and completion, perfect working order, soundness. And in fact, when I say integrity, that's the integrity that I'm distinguishing. It's integrity as whole and complete. Like, when you see a beautiful object, that object has an integrity in and of itself, because it's very much whole and complete.
Yes. Yes.
And in that way, integrity is more like you can posit it. You can look out in the universe and you can see it. And it's not about so much our judgment and assessment of whether something has integrity. Because integrity is about the state or condition of being whole and complete.
And if you look out, you can in fact see that everywhere. I mean, so then the conversation really becomes much deeper and broader in terms of this understanding, but just wholeness or completeness. And there's a lot of things that one can look to and look at and say, oh yes, this has integrity. It is whole and complete. Anything that someone may have built with technology or just a person walking down the street. Yes, that's a very, but I guess, just to acknowledge that wholeness as individual people, that's not a small matter, but this is what you're talking about, is somehow tapping into a felt sense of our wholeness or our integrity. Is an important first step, a foundation to be able to practice leadership, as you say.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And you can see it with individuals. See, it's when an individual operates with integrity. You could say that fundamentally as an individual, there's a self-integration. There's, because an individual is whole and complete when what you see is what you get, where there's no fragmented conversations. There's no pretense in life. They have very little, there's no pretense.
Mm-hmm.
They're just living authentically. And it's because they're whole and complete. So when you see an individual like that, and you could say that this individual is self-integrated, for that person, their life just works. And that's the essence of integrity. See, integrity, when you start looking at it like this, it's literally like there's a law of integrity, similar to like any other physical law, like gravity or Newton's laws, force and motion. If you saw 2 people at Starbucks having a conversation about, is gravity real? You'd either think that one of them is you might think that one of them was a mad scientist. But if you listened, you'd say they were crazy, arguing for the reality of gravity. Because no matter what you think or feel, if you defy gravity, you're going to get hurt.
Yes.
And the same thing with force and motion, the law of force and motion. If I throw an object at you that has greater mass than yourself, you're getting knocked over.
Yes. It's self-evident.
It's self-evident, right? But
yes.
Because we've been brought up in a culture that conditions us to think that human beings are unique and special, many of us think, we've been conditioned to believe that we're not given, our behavior isn't given by natural laws because we're individuals.
Yes.
So although physically, although the physical laws of the universe, people don't argue with us with that, there's also laws that determine our actions and behaviors. And this law of integrity is like one of those.
It's that science. It's that certain.
Well, yeah, that's why it's being posited as a law, not a principle of integrity, not a belief. It doesn't matter if you believe in integrity or not.
Yes. Wholeness or not. It's almost like one could even just verify that for oneself and in oneself and in the world and check it out. And so it sounds very solid in what you're saying, and also it strikes me that when we start talking about thoughts of self and what is a person, in our culture we have been conditioned by so many belief systems, and just the fact that you have to buy into a belief system, and this sort of scientific approach that you're talking about is not such a common approach. This kind of, and I get a real sense of it as we're speaking, that integrity and wholeness is self-evident, like gravity and the force of motion. It's not something that we would even have to, it's so obvious that we would have to have a conversation about. And yet, because of our cultural conditioning, it seems that it's important to do that. And so something as ourselves, as whole and complete, as simply arising, self-evidently arising. And that's kind of what I hear you saying.
Yes, no, that's exactly it. And see, with someone who lives life from this condition of wholeness and completion, their life works. So that's an access to being a leader. If that's not in place, then you have a limited opportunity to be a leader and exercise, leadership effectively in your life. The thing about the wholeness and completion, a good way to get at it is you could even imagine like a bicycle wheel. And, if you have a spoke that's loose on that wheel, you could say that it's not even you could say, what happens is the integrity of the wheel is somewhat compromised. It'll still work, but it's somewhat compromised.
Yes.
Now, when I take my bicycle out for a leisurely ride around Battery Park, I'm not paying much attention to that loose spoke. Because for me, I'm just taking a nice bike ride. Now, eventually I'm going to have to attend to it. Because if I don't, it's going to affect the wheel, and the wheel's not going to be able to perform. And then my bike will eventually fail. But for all intents and purposes, for a leisurely bike ride, that loose spoke is fine. Now, I have a friend who is a bike racer. He's a member of a bike club, and they race in Central Park every Sunday. And he's a nut about bicycle racing. And he races in the over 40, the senior set. So he spends, he could spend hours attending to his bike. And for him, that loose spoke really matters.
Yes.
Because he knows that the wheels have to work. They have to work perfectly. So he really does attend to that spoke. And the only difference between him and myself is he has something at stake for himself in racing. It really matters. Whereas with me taking that leisurely bike ride around Battery Park, I don't have a lot at stake for myself. I'm just having a good time. So integrity only matters when you have something at stake for yourself.
Yes, very,
when
very.
You want to create or produce something way beyond yourself.
Yeah, when I want to say when your back is up against the wall, but what you're saying is when you really have something at stake, when you have to perform, like in a race or in a business or in one's work, whatever one's work is, as an artist, when one really has to perform and put up or shut up, so to speak, then one has a context where there's a kind of an urgency, I guess, where, yes, you're interested in every single stroke. And if optimal support functioning is happening, and then that sort of ups the ante, so to speak.
Yeah, and it's great what you said. There's something you said when there's an urgency, and that is the essence of it. But see, it's an urgency unlike the type of urgency that most of us live from, because a lot of people, their urgency is driven by circumstances. Whereas this urgency is one that you create for yourself. So my buddy who races bicycles around Central Park, there's no urgency that comes from the race. It's him generating urgency, causing an urgency that has him take actions which involve him spending a couple of hours making sure his bike works.
It's an urgency that arises out of his own integrity.
Yes.
And it arises from within himself. And that's the very important distinction you're making. Circumstances versus the integrity or wholeness of oneself.
Right. Now, one thing you said, the urgency doesn't arise from our own integrity, because integrity is just a state of condition of being whole and complete. The urgency arises out of a choice to have something in one's life be at stake. And when that happens, when you make that choice, then integrity matters.
Gotcha. And that would also point to, we haven't talked about authenticity directly, but I'm guessing that's what's out of that, choosing to act in a context where something really matters, or where there's a priority, significant priority. So.
Right. Yeah. Without integrity, there's no possibility of being authentic. So authenticity does rest on a foundation of integrity. And you could say that when someone is authentic, there's nothing between them and life. See, they're all there. The whole, when you're around someone that's authentic, you're just drawn to that person. At least I find myself. Because that person isn't living from any illusions or pretenses or anything like that. They're living from this deep place of self-integration.
Well, and that would also, we see that a lot in sort of leaders who are, at the forefront of their experience. People are attracted to them for sure. But it doesn't have to be just well-known people in positions of political power or whatever, what have you. But it could be just we're attracted to these qualities in others.
Right.
And I concur. That's a sort of a natural drawing too. When we observe around us, people who have a felt sense of integrity and a wholeness in the manner that we're speaking, and then are acting in the world authentically with the kind of urgency that my life matters and what I do really does matter. And
right.
why I'm acting and for I'm acting, for whom or what I'm acting is very, very important. And yeah, you can feel that in another person. You can feel that quality, and I think also we can feel it in ourselves when we're buzzing at this depth and breadth that we're speaking about. That we can sort of feel this thrill of life, perhaps, but maybe we're just too busy living it to actually feel it. But maybe we can. Is that sort of kind of? Am I capturing the essence of?
Yeah. You're beginning to. Yeah, you are capturing a lot of the essence of it. The other thing is, I was listening to you. See, the other thing about individuals who are authentic and who are men and women of integrity is that when you look at the results in their life, they perform at a very high level. So in the way we're distinguishing integrity,
Mm-hmm.
integrity, you know, as a definition, it's the definition that we talked about in terms of the bicycle wheel. It applies to objects or systems and human beings, because we could even look at ourselves as a human being as a system. And in that way, again, it's about whole and complete, being whole and complete. But see, when things are whole and complete, they just work. They just work. So integrity is about workability, the workability of one's life, one's lives. For human beings, it's our lives. And when our lives work, when there's a foundation of workability, that actually sets up the opportunity set for performance. So if our lives work, there's a tremendous opportunity for us to perform at a very high level. See, if that bicycle wheel doesn't work, forget about any sort of performance happening or high performance. So, you know, in life, there's a lot of things that people do to perform at a high level. There's a lot of strategies to be put in place. There's creativity that you need. So, and all those things are necessary and important. But unless that's put in place on a condition of workability, all those things will never matter.
And workability in this sense you're speaking is, this sounds really inadequate, but a sense of flow or a sense of moving forward, a capacity that a person may have to respond and work the situation, see the situation, observe what is what and where is what, and then respond in a way at cause, or responding, not being a victim of the circumstance, but engaging directly with the circumstance and working something.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And it's engaged. It's all in the you know, when you said the thing about engaging with the circumstances, that's the heart of it. It's not so much engaging with the circumstances as it is being able to respond authentically in the face of whatever circumstances one is dealing with.
Yes. Wow, that's very existential, and really opens up and broadens the playing field, so to speak. So the idea is just some sort of on the surface level of being able to react and make something happen, but to be sufficiently authentic, sufficiently consciously have integrity and authentic in a way that whatever circumstances, one with some degree of mastery and ease can respond to whatever circumstance presents itself. That's very different than just being kind of slick in a kind of a one-trick pony kind of a way of just but because that's more interested in, more connected with, and as the whole life process itself, it seems to me. This integrity and authenticity is about the whole of one's life, not just this particular project that one is working on. That's kind of what I hear you saying.
Yes, that's great. It's also when you had said that the whole life, you said something about the whole life process, and in life, life is always perfect. Life can never not be perfect. Or you could say, instead of life, if you want to substitute the universe. See, because at any given moment, the universe can only be the way it is and the way it's not. Or at any given moment, your life can only be the way it is and the way it's not. Now, you might have a lot of commentary and judgments and assessments about it, but in reality, it's always perfect. Perfect meaning it is the way it is, and it's not the way it's not. And most of us don't live our lives like that, because most of us don't live from a recognition of that, of the fundamental integrity in the universe. So remember, integrity, as I'm talking about integrity like this law of integrity.
Yes, things as they are.
Exactly. Things as they are and things as they're not. They can't be any other way than that.
And by using the word perfect, you do not mean in some positive way of some good or bad, good versus bad. You mean wholeness. Things are as they are and as they are not. And
right.
There's nothing outside of that. Things are just what they are.
Right, exactly. That's exactly how I mean perfect. I'm not saying perfect like any sort of normative.
Yes.
Or any judgment. And so one of my teachers said that that's the way the universe is. Don't lie about it.
Oh, acknowledge it and don't lie about it. Yes.
Right.
Very important step for most of us.
Yes.
And a significant step and an important step to acknowledge things as they are without avoiding that fact in any way, and then living that way, not lying about it, responding to life in such a manner that reflects this awareness, felt sense of just things are as they are.
Right.
Integrity.
Right. And then that brings that, in a way, that speaks to what's necessary to be a leader in your own life. Because if one can just choose the way their life is and the way that it's not right now, then in a way, all there is for a leader to do is just choose the way it is, and then from there, you can. What are you going to create? What do you want to create? What's your stand? What's your stand?
In any given moment, and that applies in one's life, and so manifesting leadership, quote, in and as oneself, is responding to circumstances in the manners that we're speaking about, acknowledging integrity and wholeness, acknowledging things and the circumstance as it is, and not lying about it, avoiding that fact, and then simply respond as one would, and with a kind of with an intention to do something. We wouldn't respond if we weren't wanting to do something.
Right. Yeah, it's more than just responding. It's about what's the future you want to create. Because see, if you're spending time arguing about the way things are, then you're not really creating anything. Because see, the fundamental aspect of creation is something from nothing. Something from nothing. And you could say the state of nothing is a state of wholeness and completion, because in nothing there's everything.
Yes.
So, but if you're spending your life resisting and arguing and thinking things should be some other way than they are, then your life is about changing certain things. And it becomes about looking at the circumstances and trying to manipulate and change and fix those. And you're back to the materialism that we talked about at the beginning of our conversation. Versus when you're actually able to just choose life the way it is and the way it's not. See, we were born into life. We didn't actually, there's some spiritual disciplines that actually say that we have a choice about when we want to be born, but I don't know about that stuff, because I can't remember. Yeah. I can't remember if I had a choice about being born. So in a way, we were born, and then life happens, and to a degree, we didn't have a choice about that.
Yes.
And at every moment, we can still choose life.
And when you say
the way it's not.
Yes, you're using the word creating and creating the future, but and just to break that down, creating is creation, or creating in this sense means that we're acting fully and heartfully out of an acknowledged sense of wholeness in an authentic way, versus resisting things as they are, responding to our ideas about how things are, versus just responding to how things are. And creation, or creating in this sense, in leadership, being a leader in and as one's life, with oneself, for oneself, but also with others, is creating with this full embodied knowledge, not intellectual knowledge, but a bodily felt knowledge of integrity and wholeness, and then an authentic response to the situation that genuinely wants to create something, however small or large that may be, not just respond instinctually, every response we may give is not necessarily a response from integrity and wholeness. But responding as a leader is responding to the situation with a heartfelt, and I use that word heartfelt to mean, when you were saying wanting to create the future, wanting to create something with some degree of urgency and full possession of the knowledge of our wholeness.
Yeah, that's actually the essence. In a way, that's the essence of it.
Yes. So, and I'm wondering if there's anything else about because this point you were making, very important, I think it can't be underestimated. It's not any old response. It's a response that is befitting of our felt sense of integrity and then authentically expressed as ourselves moving forward, but not just an impulsive response, not a fear-based response where we're responding to our ideas about how things are there as they are, how we think things are versus how things really are.
Yeah.
And
that's a necessary condition right there. But in the way it is, see, it's not just responding. It goes further than that.
mm-hmm.
Because if you're someone that's living for something bigger than oneself, like living life from a much higher context than yourself as an individual, then it's really just about what actions are you going to take? What are you going to create that fulfills on that something higher than oneself, bringing that something that's higher than oneself, having your life be a fulfillment of that, rather than living life from what you want or don't want or don't like or how you think or how you feel. See, that's a vortex that sucks us right back into living life very reasonably, very circumstantially.
So, in this, for something, a context greater than ourselves and for something greater than ourselves. And that, it strikes me also that really is, the quickest way we can discover integrity is by, just even thinking about what would be beyond myself, what would be more important than myself, that would sort of bring my whole life into view.
Yes, that actually, before I became a, executive coach and consultant, I used to be in the entertainment business.
Mm-hmm.
So I was and specifically, I was in rock and roll. And
okay.
I first worked for a major talent promoter. So when I first got out of college, I got what arguably you could say was a dream job. I was working with these huge artists, like at that time, on the caliber of like Elton John or The Who, Billy Joel, who was just starting out, and I loved it. And I was completely driven by wanting to really be a success. So I ended up eventually starting my own company in Boston and got really successful, and then moved to New York City and opened up an office. And all I wanted to do was be more successful, which meant like I was sort of after the fame and the glory, more money, bigger artists. And at one point, I ended up taking a program that in many ways you could say was based on living a life of integrity. And in that program, I saw suddenly myself as a 10-year-old. And there I was 10 years old, and I'm looking at some of my father's friends. And some of my father's friends are very, very wealthy. And to a 10-year-old, when his father's friends are driving Cadillacs and his father is driving a Dodge, and when his father's friends, they have a lot of money, they just seem to be ruling the roost. They seem to be in control of things. And I remember, to me, to a 10-year-old, that's what success was. And at that point, I decided that I didn't want to be like my father. I wanted to be like my father's friends who own their own businesses. I didn't want to be like my father, just a paper salesman. And there I was at 33, driven by this need to be successful. And I suddenly saw that where it stemmed from, that I literally had made that decision as a 10-year-old. And when I saw that, instead I could see that I had a choice of whether I just wanted to be more successful or whether I wanted to create a context higher than myself of contribution and fulfillment. Like having my life be an expression of that as a possibility. So what I did is I just chose that. And I didn't know what was going to happen. But I literally said, all right, I'm going to have a life of contribution and fulfillment because I could see that my life driven by success, although it was pleasurable when I made the next rung up on the ladder, it quickly disappeared because I was in it for the goodies.
Yes.
So when I generated, pardon?
Now, a very important distinction you're making, and I'm appreciating you just the way you're diving in with this with your own experience. Go ahead.
Well, so when I generated this context of contribution and fulfillment, I began to live from there, and I didn't know what I was going to do. But what eventually happened was from that change, that really changed my fundamental orientation to life. And friends of mine they noticed this change in me, and they just started to ask me for advice. And usually their advice had to do with their work or careers. So I would start advising them. And my advice worked and made a difference for them in their lives. So within a year, I ended up selling my entertainment business and began a career as an executive coach and consultant. Something that I love doing that's very challenging to me, and I'll do it till I drop. And it makes a difference for me, and it makes, more important, never mind me, it makes a difference for people in their lives. So that immediately happened. And then the second thing that happened is that I ended up loving and appreciating my father in a way that I had never loved and appreciated him before. Because when I saw that my dad was someone that sacrificed for his family, it was the most important thing to him in his life. But to that 10-year-old, that just didn't matter because all my dad's friends had families, so it was no big deal. But when I created this possibility for myself of contribution and fulfillment, literally in an instant, my father became my hero and became a model for me of what it takes to sacrifice in life or give of yourself for something higher. And my dad passed away like 3 years ago, but from that moment, I just had an amazing relationship with my father.
Wow, and and again, we're back to the felt sense of integrity and authenticity, and I'm just struck again and again as you're speaking about your own experience, the wholeness, and doing something for something greater than one's life, actually. For the legacy of the people that come after you, which is beyond any kind of normative or conventional means of success or accomplishment, because those all come and go. And what you're talking about is the very background and foreground of one's entire life and legacy. And always responding from and as this sense of integrity and wholeness for this sense of integrity and wholeness, which is actually mysteriously bigger, always bigger than oneself. And
right.
That's the sort of the magic elixir, if you will, of why people would approach you and say, hey, well, can you give me some advice? You know, just some attraction that people feel toward you, the magic elixir that sort of makes things have workability, makes
right.
life work. Yes.
No, that's right. See, I was going to say, Bill, yeah, and everything works. Your life works. So, you know, financial success was all part of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not in order to.
Yes. Yes.
And that's the essence of materialism. It's not like, you know, one could become very, very wealthy and not be driven by making money. One can become very, very wealthy in their life, and it extends to everything about their life.
Yes. And actually, you know, that speaks to being beneficial to others. And a lot of time, just what you say, people in that position are very, in fact, very beneficial. They benefit other people, large numbers of people. And what you're saying is any limited definition of success or achievement is not the point. It's the whole of things moving forward, always staying with the workability of oneself.
Right.
And then out of that, will come all kinds of things.
Yes, and the essence of living for something bigger than oneself, or living life from a context bigger than just oneself, is you live a life in which you can have it all. There's not an ounce of sacrifice, because you're not sacrificing something in your life for something higher. Your life becomes an expression of that which is higher.
Mm. Yes. Yes, indeed. And everything always is in the picture then. And that
exactly.
That the whole of oneself, and in fact, beyond that, the whole of life itself, that in that which includes one's individuality and one's individual life, all of that is always in the picture. Yes. Is there anything else about that, Mark, that you want to say? Or
well, no. I mean, this might be a good place, because I think we've spoken about an hour. I could spend. I mean, this is what my whole life's about, in a way. So there's plenty more to say.
There certainly is, and I really appreciate your life example, and your beautiful life course that you've taken, obviously. And I appreciate you spending time on this call with me. And is there any way that people can contact you? You're an executive coach, so you kind of do you have a website or?
Yeah, they could go to it's Contegra Coaching, CONTEGRA coaching.com.
Okay.
Or they can just reach me at 212-374-9214.
All right. Wonderful. All right. Appreciate it, Mark. We'll
great.
talk
Thank
soon.
you, Bill.
And have a great day.
All right. It was great.
Bye-bye.
This hour was great. Bye.
Thanks.